App install advertisers. History shows that September, your costs are going to be going up almost 20%. In this episode of the Paid Traffic Forecast, we're going to show you what's around the corner for your campaigns, the hot spots and cold spots you need to pay attention to, what the projection models say you could expect from your results, and the 3 plays you can focus on to help you fix that delta and prepare for the future. More on that right after this. Hey there, and welcome to the September 2025 Paid Traffic Forecast for app installs. I'm John Belcher, the founder here at Decyphered. That's Ross Pietersen, the head of media buying, and looking forward to showing you what's around the corner for the next 30 days. So to quickly introduce what we do here at Decyphered, we help all of our clients play what we call the scaling game. Paid traffic is a game. It's a never-ending game of figuring out what you need to do to unlock your next level of scale. It's composed of 7 levels that we've found so far. Winning is about having a game plan. You need clarity on which level you're on so you can focus on taking the actions that are important for you right now to level up. And one thing that's really important is you have to understand the cost environment you're in, and because it has a huge impact on results. And that's why we created this forecast. So we're going to dive in and explain what this forecast is for you in the next 30 days. All right, quick overview of the forecast. What we're going to do is walk through 4 things. The September outlook, what the last 5 years tells us is likely in store for you as an app install advertiser. The hot spots and cold spots you need to pay attention to. Ross is going to give you specific dates and the actions you may need to take. Then I'm going to go through the projection models, explain what your numbers could look like depending on what you focus on. And then finally, we're going to go through the cost environment playbook, 3 things that you can do to maximize your results and or prepare for the future. So for the September outlook, just a quick background on how this forecast was created. My job is to provide projections to our clients, and I wanted to have a very systematic way of doing this. So I went and looked at the 5-year historicals on Meta for the 4 major conversion types and analyzed CPM trends using hundreds of millions of dollars in ad spend. And then I developed a model, which we tested against our actuals, and we found we could project within about 5% of actual performance for clients spending $1 million a month or more. Now, what's important for you to know is while we use Meta as our data source, these percentages apply across platforms. So we've tested against Meta, Google Native, and it's starting to apply to AppLovin even more as more advertisers are coming on board. What's important for you to know is this is a forecast, not a prophecy. Just like a weather forecast, they may tell you it's going to rain and it doesn't, or they may tell you it's going to be sunny and it pours. What's important is you have an understanding of what history says is around the corner and then the ability to adjust. So for you as an app install advertiser in the month of September, what's really important for you to understand is your costs are going to be going up 18.8% between the beginning of the month and the end of the month, which is a massive change, especially when compared to August, you saw this big downslope, right? Last month was good times. This is when we're starting heading into the bad times, and especially in Q4. So Ross is going to walk you through what we call the hot spots in the next section. But what I just really want to point out here is you're seeing this massive upward slope, which means you're going to need to do prep for what's around the corner in the months to come. All right, Ross, let's talk through hot spots and cold spots.
So just briefly, the idea of what hot spots and cold spots are, we define them by drastic changes in cost environment in a short period of time. So if CPMs are going up in a very short space of time, we call that a hot spot. If they're going down in a very short space of time, we call those cold spots. So let's quickly take a look at the specific dates that we've outlined for, in particular, app installers for the month of September. The first is the 17th and the second is the 26th of September. The 17th sees a very short-lived cold spot, and then the 26th is a hot spot heading into the much higher peak, sort of high cost period. Now, as we look at our graph here, you'll see from the 17th, we head into this little dip, and it's a really short period of time where there's a cost decrease. And what you're expected to happen here, and the reason why this is so significant is there's a huge danger of overspend. So you're going to see lots of budget come out, and then you're going to head into this higher peak. And from the 26th, costs are just going to skyrocket. So those are the 2 significant dates we've outlined, John, for September for app installs.
And one thing I want to make really clear here is we determine a hot spot or a cold spot by math, right? We don't just look at this and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. It's a percentage change in CPMs. So that's why back here, you see this little rise, this little rise. These aren't hitting our threshold. And so this is where Ross is looking at these numbers. These are truly mathematically standing out as big changes in a time period.
So let's take a quick look at what a hot spot feels like. And as you head into it, your cost per install is going to start going up. And this is when we refer to two different type of advertisers, those in uncontrolled spending and those with controlled. And those would be defined by, when you're running on Meta and you're doing cost per install, you install campaigns, and there are no constraints. You don't have bid caps, or you don't have target CPA or target ROAS. Those are uncontrolled spends. So when you have that environment in going into a hotspot, you're generally going to have underspend, where you're spending a certain amount of money, you can't tolerate those costs. And underspend means if you're spending $100 a day, you're going to have a much lower percentage of that $100 being used, so a $60 or a $70. If you're in the controlled advertising space using target CPA or bid caps, you'll have underspend, and or you'll actually have some of your ads stop spending. So if you're really on the fringe of your targets, anything that's on the fringe will likely stop spending, and everything else that is spending will start possibly under delivering.
And I think something to call out here is if you're leveraging other platforms where you have a target cost per install, something on Google, AppLovin, like whatever it is that you're running on, understanding that if you're using this target cost per install, that you're a controlled advertiser and you are going to experience way more volatility than if you're doing it in an uncontrolled fashion, I think is important to call out. All right. So Ross, let's talk about the mistakes that people make when they head into a hotspot.
So when we're heading into a hotspot, there's high risk of budget waste and stability. When you're in the uncontrolled advertising space, so you don't have those constraints, big mistake you're making is not monitoring your budget usage. So as I mentioned before, if you're spending $100 and all of a sudden some of your campaigns are not spending that full total, you need to be monitoring this, because these are early signs and early indicators of things going the wrong way. Next thing is pushing those budgets up, trying to navigate that underspend. Because of the cost environment and these measures, so you're heading into this higher cost season, pushing those budget up aren't going to counteract the underspend. In essence, you're really just feeding the algorithm the idea that I'm willing to pay more and sending false signals, possibly even undoing all the learning that you've just put into the machine. And then the last thing is blaming the network. And we typically see this, Sean, where people say, oh, it's just a bad day on Facebook. What we realized is this machine is pretty predictable if you understand the underlying mechanics. Most of the time, if there's something that's out of the blue, out of the ordinary, not normal, it's because there's a cost change or there's some kind of outage. And if you're just saying it's a bad day on Facebook and you're not looking at the underlying ripple current effects, I think it's a big mistake, especially on a high spend.
Yeah, the other thing that we see in particular on social media is we see people go, well, Facebook's going through an algorithm change, right? That's usually not what's going on. And that's why we're trying to give you dates to pay attention to, is like, hey, the 26th plus or minus a couple days, because sometimes these dynamics can change, but be on the lookout, because it's not an algorithm change. It's a cost environment change. And so it's really important to know what to look out for, so you don't do what Ross just said, boost your budgets to try and combat that underspend. Like, this isn't a network problem. It's an auction problem. And it's something that you have to be prepared to take care of. So Ross, what are the mistakes that controlled advertisers make?
So in this situation, especially if you're using cost controls, you start raising those bids, raising those cost parameters. The problem with this is now you're telling the algorithm, I'm looking for a different segment of person because you're willing to spend more. While that could give you a short-term gain, what you're doing now is you're undoing all the learning that has gotten that ad to that point of view, just for a short-term increase in cost. So this is a huge mistake. You need to be looking at alternatives as opposed to fixing this by pushing budgets and CPA. Same thing for the controlled advertiser. Pushing these budgets is not going to fix underspend. It's just not. The costs are too high, won't be able to tolerate it, and they'll stop spending or underspend. And the last thing is, you got to always remember that only your strong ads are going to survive in these high cost environments. So if you've got your real unicorns running, those are the ones that'll continue running and continue performing. All the other ones that are on the fringe, just on the byline, that are on the cusp of your targets, those will stop spending. So it's really important to make sure that you've got enough of those running in these high cost period of time.
Yeah, and before we dive into your example here to show how we do this, I just wanted to mention, if you're looking at this and saying, okay, you're basically saying I don't have any tools, I'm just going to have a delta in my performance. That's right. And that's what the cost environment playbook is, to talk about how you offset this. But you have to understand, towards the end of the month, you're probably just going to have a delta in your performance. You're just going to be producing lower than you want to be, especially if you're a controlled advertiser. And if you have 6 different angles that are performing and 3 of them drop out, like, the delta is going to become really big. And this is why you have to have a plan moving into the month of understanding what's coming up, so you can offset that delta as these things come around. All right, Ross, let's look at cold spots now.
So because we're experiencing both, let's quickly talk about the cold spots. And in both of these, the cold spot is where there's much higher risk. And the reason is there's this expansion, this overspend. So what'll happen is all of a sudden you'll have some overspend. You're coming down the hill, costs are in a very short period of time decreasing. So all of a sudden ad networks start dumping budget to say, oh, cool, there's this opening of constraints. And now all of a sudden you've got overspend, and it creates massive instability, and it can cause major, major, major issues. Let's just quickly talk about some of the risks in cold spots. So what you're trying to avoid is extending your recovery period and potentially ruining your account and your ability to carry on producing, app installs. For those in the uncontrolled advertising space, again, ignoring that overspend, looking at how much your budget's actually spending. Drastic budget changes as a reaction. So very often you might see, oh, this is great. Maybe you want to slow it down and you're dropping budgets, or you're like, man, this is great time. We've lost a whole bunch of opportunity. Let's double down and go and throw some stuff in. This is the wrong time to be doing big budget changes. And then the other thing is scaling too soon before things stabilize. We'll go into a quick example just now, but I just want to cover and what that will look like. Those in the controlled advertising space, again, you got to keep an idea and keep tabs and monitor your budget usage on a daily basis. Big bid changes are also a huge problem. Remembering that when you're setting that bid, the algorithm is learning to go and find you people at that cost. When that thing is changing, you're resetting the learning. So when I change that budget, I'm now saying to the algorithm, I'm willing to find people. So it's resetting everything. So if you've just changed it and then you change it again and then you change it again, all of your performance has gone out the window. And then the other thing is rebuilding and scaling too fast. So very often what happens, John, you and I know this, is at the end of this, we end up with campaigns that were previously working, and then we have to rebuild them. Now, when we rebuild them, the idea of starting them at their previous spend or accelerating that previous spend, it's tempting. We want to get there and get that performance back. But we've seen time and time again that we need to make sure that we follow some rules and steadily scale and get back up to that level so that that learning can happen again.
And once again, we're telling you these mistakes not with the Godfather. Like, we've made all of these mistakes, right? That's why we know these things. And so it's really important when you're going through a cold spot is being aware of what's about to happen, taking your hands off the controls. Media buyers who love to go in and play with stuff to try and steady performance. We make optimizations one time a day. And when we're going through a cold spot, it's like, Ross, just take your hands off. We understand what's going to take place. We need to see how this shakes out before we make decisions. And so Ross monitors spend versus budget on a daily basis, right? This is the piece we put into place. And so he's gone through here and showed you this is what a cold spot looks like for us, right? So Ross, go through and explain this.
So what you'll see here is a list of all our campaigns and what we've set our budgets at from a daily basis. And then in the next column, you'll actually see how much we've spent. Our last column is what we have as a percentage. So how much did we actually spend of our budget? And anything that is yellow or orange is overspend. Now you can see there's quite a list there. That is a significant amount of ads that have all of a sudden spent way more than their daily budget, which means this is literally the day after when we were looking at this cold spot. So this is what the cold spot looks like. All of a sudden, there's this drop in cost. Algorithm says, oh, great, there's some constraints that have been removed and there's this overspend. My big job in these scenarios is to stabilize cost. I want to make as few changes as possible so that things settle first. I'm adjusting every single campaign or ad one at a time. I'm judging them on performance, but I'm making sure I'm not making big changes, because what will happen is you'll overspend, you might underspend, and then you'll stabilize back to normal. And then that's when you can get back to normal proceedings.
So, as a takeaway, whether you run an agency or you're a member of an internal team, making sure that your client or the executives on your team who are looking at performance, hey, in the next couple days, we're likely to experience this, right? We're probably going to have a day or two where we overspend and performance doesn't look great because the machine has pushed out more spend than we wanted. So whenever you spend, as spend increases, CPA, ROAS goes down, CPA goes up. And this is really important and critical for you to be monitoring these things to say, we know what's coming up and we're watching it so we can actually see, are these things taking place? This is why we put all these systems in here so we can A, communicate beforehand, and then B, understand what actions we need to take to guide us through it without making all of these changes. All right, Ross, thanks so much for walking us through that. Now let's go through the seasonal macro trends that are across all advertisers.
So this is what you and I do when we plan a year, just to understand. We've got a annual calendar, which we then outline for each month for big events that, typically like Q4, we all know about Black Friday, Cyber Monday, but in every month, there are some macro events that we're looking at. A lot of them are influenced by big brand advertiser buys or even election campaigns or those kinds of things. And this is stuff that affects all of us. So this is a separate section. No matter what space you're in, you're very likely to have things affect you. And the two that we have for this month that are stacked on top of each other is the end of a quarter as well as the end of the month. So you've got an amplification here where there's an end of a quarter dump. So big brands have got these quarterly budgets. They now either spend that budget or lose it. So they don't want to lose those budgets to go buy out with their last remaining budgets, and you've got them stacked end of month and end of quarter, which exacerbates the situation.
And so I think what's really important to touch on here is you're going to see an overall cost increase in regards to app installs. So like your direct competitors, this is what you're going to see, the overall trend line. But when we talk about the global market, in these last 2 weeks of September, these big brands are just taking, so if we have a whole pie as all the available impressions, they're taking a huge slice out of that. So now, not only do you have increases in your direct competition, the indirect competition is taking up a big portion. And so you're likely going to get choked out even more on top of what you're already seeing. And this is just really important for you to understand and plan for. We always talk with our clients, hey, we're coming up on end of quarter, end of month. We're expecting the next 10 days to be a little bit choppy. We're obviously going to do everything we can to navigate through it, just letting you know this is what's around the corner. Thanks so much, Ross. Appreciate you guiding us through that. All right. My job is projection models. So let's go through and talk about what these numbers can actually look like. And when I'm going through this, really what I'm trying to do is view the CPM impact on results. So what does the cost environment mean for the overall P&L? A couple of variables that I consider: selling days. This is really important for you. So September has one fewer days than August. And so if a company's looking at saying, well, we did this in August, we want to produce it in September, you're like, cool, but we have 3% fewer days, right? 30 versus 31. We have to take that into account. We're already going to be probably revising down our projections based off the number of days. And then on top of that, conversion rates, right? So depending on whatever you sell, I'm going to use supplements as an example because it's one I'm really familiar with. August is horrible. So we revise down our projections just based off conversion rates, but in September we see a rebound, so those get revised up. And so this is really important for you with your historical data of looking at it and saying, all right, we have one fewer selling days, and do we have any major historical conversion rate changes between September and August that we need to factor in? The result of this exercise is evergreen production. What can we expect our evergreen proven base of campaigns to produce? So we're not talking about flighted seasonal things, right? Just our core customer acquisition campaigns. This is going to give us a number of this is what we think is going to produce. And the conclusion is the monthly focuses. So whatever we see with the models, we need to determine what actions and we need to focus on to make up deltas or plan for the future, and how risky can those actions be. So higher CPMs, I've gone through and tried to simplify this for you. In August, if you spent $100,000 and we're expecting to see CPMs go up 18.8%, for that same $100,000 in September, the number of impressions that people you're going to be able to reach is going to decrease by 18.8%. And how this is important is we're just looking at this in regards to your funnel progression. So if we're reaching fewer impressions and our CTRs are going to stay similar, that means our number of clicks are going to go down, which means our number of app installs are going to go down and our cost per install is going to go up. And then activations, like when I've worked with apps in the past, you've got the install and then you've got the activation event, like they're actually doing something in the app. And then finally, you've got your purchase or monetization event. And so when we look at this, we're just saying 18.8% fewer people are just going to be a part of our funnel this month, which means we're going to have worse ROI. That's the gist of what it is that we're trying to do. So I go through and I develop a spreadsheet that looks like this. If our August production was $100,000 in spend, let's say we're generating $3 cost per install. Say we make $6 in revenue per install. We were doing $200,000 and a 2.0 ROAS. Well, in September, we're going to get crushed, right? So if we just maintain the same amount of spend, we're going to see our cost per install go up to $3.56. And if we have that same revenue per sale, now all of a sudden our ROAS is 1.68. If the client says, hey, we cannot do fewer installs, we have to maintain our volume, well, we're going to have to push higher into higher CPMs, which means we're probably going to have to spend $141,000 to make this same thing, the same volume of installs happen. Our cost per install goes up to 4.23, which means our ROAS drops to a 1.42 for that same amount of revenue. And then finally, if we say, hey, we can't afford more than $3 per install, we're going to have to pull back at least $30,000 in spend in order to maintain this. And the reason I say at least is we treat this like stocks, where if you're saying I'm willing to buy at this fixed price, if that fixed price is at or above market price, all of your orders are going to get filled. But now if you're bidding below market price, a lot of people aren't going to accept that offer. And the same thing happens with the auction. This is like best case scenario of what you could spend if you're trying to maintain that $3 cost per install and your ROAS. As you can see here, your revenue is going to shrink almost $60,000. So that's what the models say is going to happen with our base evergreen. What can we do about it, right? And this is where we have to talk about, as our costs go up, our results go down. So our actions need to be low risk plays that we can focus on executing, knowing that they have a higher chance of success to help us combat rising costs. And that is where our cost environment playbook comes in. I want to try and give you 3 things that you can focus on to maintain your results, similar to what you did in August. And so we've got these in 3 areas. Our high lift plays, these are the things that typically take the most effort. Medium lift is middle, and then low lift are things you could do quickly and easily. So the high lift play is supporting proven partners and affiliates. Medium lift is your non-paid efforts, and your low lift is proven angle iterations. I'm going to walk you through all 3 of them. So supporting proven partners and affiliates. If you have a good affiliate program, or even if you just have like a couple people that have produced really well, there's 2 things that you can do. The first one is handing off your proven angles to your affiliates. Some affiliates will just take your existing creatives and run them. Not awesome. But what I really love when we work with good affiliates is they have different creative perspective, right? They're producing, we don't do a lot of UGC videos. We do more like B-roll voiceovers. If we have an affiliate that's good at UGC, we say, here's an angle that's performing really well. Go run your playbook, right? And they're able to produce more volume because they're getting injected ideas that already work. And so that's a really easy thing you can do to double up on results for proven angles, is just saying, hey guys, this is what's been working for us. Go run it and see what happens. The other things that you can do in higher cost environments is seasonal payout bumps, but I have careful here in all caps, because what's important about this is typically with affiliate programs, what you're paying out to an affiliate is lower than you're willing to pay yourself for a cost per install. So you do have some additional margin built in. What I would recommend is running a test to help offset, since you're not going to be able to produce as much yourself, offering them to do a payout increase. I just put 10% in here as an example. But you don't just want to say, hey, we're going to give you a payout bump, and they're expecting that to be forever, right? You're like, I want to try and do it during our higher cost environment, but you have to frame it in a way that's like, this isn't necessarily going to take place for good. So I drafted you an example email. You're an awesome partner. Let's do a Q4 test. And obviously we're talking September. So it's like, we're just going to do September. Hey man, I'm interested in seeing what the numbers look like if we give you a payout bump in Q4. I can't promise we'll be able to stick at the higher level, but since you've been an awesome partner, I'd be willing to risk it. Let me know your thoughts. I don't know any affiliates who are making good money that are going to say no to this. But the prefacing is so important here where you're like, I'm not going to give you a 10% bump, because if you just say that, they're just going to take it. And now that becomes the new norm. This is the way you preface it to go, this is going to be temporary. I'm going to have to make sure the numbers back out. And then as you get through Q4, you're like, hey, probably didn't generate the way we want to. We got to reset you. But then you're heading back into a lower cost environment in Q1. Now you can kind of move from there. So that's how I would handle this with supporting your proven partners. Second thing is your non-paid efforts. So it's really important to understand your delta, like we talked about in the projection spreadsheet. If we're going with the maintaining cost per install, our delta is going to be almost $60,000 from paid between September and August. And so what I do when I was VP of marketing for a big supplement company, whenever we had a delta, we would go through and determine the number of campaigns. We knew on average an email campaign could produce this, social could do this, SMS, what have you. We just basically went through and said, okay, if it's $60,000, how many additional campaigns are we going to have to run? And then we would go through and determine content off of that. So I wanted to give you an example. I just went and looked at the top apps on the App Store this week, and Duolingo was on the list. And so I went and looked at their Instagram, and this was one of the first things that popped up, is that now you can learn chess on Duolingo. So what I would do with this angle, hey, we've got a new product, we've got a new offering, this is something you can do. I would go turn this into social posts. And I love that movie Queen's Gambit, but now I can become a chess master by using Duolingo. And so it's just something of like, people can engage with Queen's Gambit, whatever it is that they like in their chess world, right? There's some really famous guys. I can't remember the number one player in the world, but like people like to follow. Yeah, Magnus Carlsen. But people like to follow chess. And so this is something where we would go through and get creative with organic text messages, emails, explaining to people like, you thought Duolingo was just for languages, but did you actually know that you can do it for chess as well? And so this is a way that you can activate people that are followers that don't have the app, or maybe they had the app because they wanted to learn French and then they got rid of it. Well, now you can reactivate them, right? And so these are just some of the things that I would look at doing. I wanted to give you an example of like real world example. This is how we would go through and make this play take place. And then the final one is deploying proven angle iterations. So when in a higher cost environment, Ross, what we focus on is we don't want to be testing a bunch of new angles. We do keep it as a portion of our testing. We never really want to stop testing new stuff, but our percentage of new angles drops dramatically because we don't want to be wasting money testing new things that have a lower chance of success. So our goal is to produce new versions of proven angles, iterations that provide new content for the platform, but it maximizes our chance of success because it's already built on something we know works. I recently created an N8N, which if you're not familiar, it's an automation and AI platform that allows us to produce new iterations at scale. And so basically what I do is I run a query that looks at our top 10 ads and gives us links to the videos. It downloads it, transcribes them, puts it through an agent and say, I want iterations of this. I want them turned out using the very similar format, but you have a little bit of creative liberty. It'll write a new script. We use 11 labs to go in and generate a voiceover. And then we just get that over to our video editor to get them produced and launched. And so we can do, 15, 20, 30 iterations in a very short period of time. The creative strategy team doesn't even have to touch it because we're just automating this process, right? And so to give you an example of how this has worked out for us, Angle 20 is one of our top performing angles for our biggest client. It's a long-standing high performer. It spent $2.5 million year to date. But in the month of August, the production started to drop. It started to kind of burn out. And so luckily, we'd started this process a few months ago when we were in our steady cost environment, which what I talked about last month for app installs, this is what we are recommending you're doing, right? So when this started to burn out, we started to get these iterations into play. And so you can see 281, 279, 287, they're starting to spend more. It's 17% of the total volume of the parent angle in this window, but that's huge because angle 20 is dropping off and these are replacing them. Ross, what are we at currently with daily budgets for each of these?
Yeah, I think to preface this, John, I think initially when we started this process, there was a question of like, is this going to work? And the philosophy that we have is we don't want to ever have one horse winning the race and having this unicorn. And what this has allowed us to do is, with very low lift, with very little effort, remix some of our best stuff and get in new horses in the race. And very interestingly, two of these specifics, we've got 281 running at about $2,000 a day, 287 probably about $1,200 a day. That's quite significant with zero lift from the creative team and just a push of a button, a bit of video editing, and all of a sudden we've got these new angles helping produce high volume for us. And it's a matter of going into this high season and we've got loads of things that are trying to all help pull the boats along and cover this delta. It's been an amazing addition from a media buying perspective because I don't now have this pressure to really push hard on very few ads.
Yep. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we've learned is consistently adding new ads is vital to your success. But in these higher cost periods, focus on things that are proven and you're just providing slight iterations and you can see the difference that this is making. So those are the 3 plays for you in the month of September. We're talking about supporting proven affiliates and partners, non-paid efforts, and deploying your proven angle iterations. I hope if you have any questions, you leave them down below. Otherwise, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching this month's paid traffic forecast. Just by watching it, you and your team now know what to expect from your overall performance and the hot spots and cold spots you need to pay attention to over the next 30 days. If you want to be this prepared every month, there's 2 things you can do. First, you can subscribe or follow our social channels so this information shows up in your feed at the beginning of every month. Second, if you want the information early, you can subscribe to our free list where you'll get the information delivered to your inbox a day ahead of time. If there's something you think we could do to improve our monthly update, just drop us a comment below and let us know what you think that is. And finally, if you're a business owner looking for someone who can help you develop an advertising ecosystem that produces more sustainable, predictable scale, make sure to head over to decyphered.com/start. On that page, you'll understand how our process works and the steps you can take to see if we might be a good fit to help you. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next month.